Chapter 23. The Letter. "And now," said Poirot, "we will go out to lunch." He put his hand through my arm. He was smiling at me. "I have hope," he explained. I was glad to see him restored to his old self, though I was none the less convinced myself of young Ronald's guilt. I fancied that Poirot himself had perhaps come round to this view, convinced by Yop's arguments. The search for the purchaser of the box was, perhaps, a last sally to save his face. We went amicably to lunch together. Somewhat to my amusement, at a table at the other side of the room, I saw Brian Martin and Jenny Driver lunching together. Remembering what Yop had said, I suspected a possible romance. They saw us, and Jenny waved a hand. When we were sipping coffee, Jenny left her escort and came over to our table. She looked as vivid and dynamic as ever. "May I sit here and talk to you a minute, Monsieur Poirot?" "Assuredly, mademoiselle. I am charmed to see you. Will not Monsieur Morton join us also?" I told him not to. You see, I wanted to talk to you about Carlotta. "Yes, mademoiselle." You wanted to get a line onto some man friend of hers, isn't that so? "Yes, yes." Well, I've been thinking and thinking. Sometimes you can't get at things straight away. To get them clear, you've got to think back, remember a lot of little words and phrases that perhaps you didn't pay much attention to at the time. Well, that's what I've been doing, thinking and remembering just what she said, and I've come to a certain conclusion. "Yes, mademoiselle." I think the man that she cared about, or was beginning to care about, was Ronald Marsh. You know, the one who has just succeeded to the title. "What makes you think it was he, mademoiselle?" Well, for one thing, Carlotta was speaking in a general sort of way one day about a man having hard luck and how it might affect character. That a man might be a decent sort, really, and yet to go down the hill. More sinned again than sinning. You know the idea. The first thing a woman kids herself with when she's getting soft about a man. I've heard the old wheeze so often. Carlotta had plenty of sense, yet here she was coming out with this stuff just like a complete ass who knew nothing of life. "Hello," I said to myself, "something's up." She didn't mention a name. It was all general. But almost immediately after that, she began to speak of Ronald Marsh, and that she thought he'd been badly treated. She was very impersonal and offhand about it. I didn't connect the two things at the time, but now I wonder. It seems to me that it was Ronald she meant. What do you think, Monsieur Poirot? Her face looked earnestly up into his. "I think, mademoiselle, that you have perhaps given me some very valuable information." "Good." Jenny clapped her hands. Poirot looked kindly at her. "Perhaps you have not heard. The gentleman of whom you speak, Ronald Marsh, Lord Edgware, has just been arrested." "Oh?" Her mouth flew open in surprise. "Then my bit of thinking comes rather late in the day." "It is never too late," said Poirot. "Not with me, you understand. Thank you, mademoiselle." She left us to return to Brian Martin. "There, Poirot," I said, "surely that shakes your belief." "No, Hastings, on the contrary, it strengthens it." Despite that valiant assertion, I believed myself that secretly he had weakened. During the days that followed, he never once mentioned the Edgware case. If I spoke of it, he answered monosyllabically and without interest. In other words, he had washed his hands of it. Whatever idea he had lingering in his fantastic brain, he had now been forced to admit himself that it had not materialized, that his first conception of the case had been the true one, and that Ronald Marsh was only too truly accused of the crime. Only, being Poirot, he could not admit openly that such was the case. Therefore he pretended to have lost interest. Such, I say, was my interpretation of his attitude. It seemed borne out by the facts. He took no faintest interest to the police court proceedings, which in any case were purely formal. He busied himself with other cases, and, as I say, he displayed no interest when the subject was mentioned. It was nearly a fortnight later than the events mentioned in my last chapter when I came to realize that my interpretation of his attitude was entirely wrong. It was breakfast time. The usual heavy pile of letters lay by Poirot's plate. He sorted through them with nimble fingers. Then he uttered a quick exclamation of pleasure and picked up a letter with an American stamp on it. He opened it with a little letter opener. I looked on with interest, since he seemed so moved with pleasure about it. There was a letter and a fairly thick enclosure. Poirot read the former through twice. Then he looked up. "Would you like to see this, Hastings?" I took it from him. It ran as follows. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I was much touched by your very kind letter. Apart from my terrible grief, I have been so affronted by the things that seem to have been hinted about Carlotta, the dearest, sweetest sister that a girl ever had. No, Monsieur Poirot, she did not take drugs. I am sure of it. She had a horror of that kind of thing. I've often heard her say so. If she played a part in that poor man's death, it was an entirely innocent one. But of course her letter to me proves that. I'm sending you the actual letter itself, since you asked me to do so. I hate parting with the last letter she ever wrote, but I know you will take care of it and let me have it back. And if it helps you to clear up some of the mystery about her death, as you say it may do, why then of course it must go to you. You ask whether Carlotta mentioned any friends specially in her letters. She mentioned a great many people, of course, but nobody in a very outstanding way. Brian Martin, whom we used to know years ago, a girl called Jenny Driver, and a Captain Roland Marsh were, I think, the ones she saw most of. I wish I could think of something to help you. You write so kindly and with such understanding, and you seem to realize what Carlotta and I were to each other. Gratefully yours, Lucy Adams. P.S. An officer has just been here for the letter. I told him that I had already mailed it to you. This, of course, was not true, but I felt somehow or other that it was important you should see it first. It seems Scotland Yard need it as evidence against the murderer. You will take it to them, but oh, please be sure they let you have it back again some day. You see, it is Carlotta's last words to me." "So you wrote yourself to her," I remarked as I laid the letter down. "Why did you do that, Poirot? And why did you ask for the original of Carlotta Adams' letter?" He was bending over the enclosed sheets of the letter I mentioned. "In verity, I could not say, Hastings, unless it is that I hoped against hope that the original letter might in some way explain the inexplicable." "I don't see how you can get away from the text of that letter. Carlotta Adams gave it herself to the maid to post. There was no hocus-pocus about it, and certainly it reads as a perfectly genuine, ordinary epistle." Poirot sighed. I know. And that is what makes it so difficult, because Hastings, as it stands, that letter is impossible." "Nonsense." See, it is so. See, you, as I have reasoned it out, certain things must be. They follow each other with method and order in an understandable fashion. But then comes this letter. It does not accord. Who then is wrong? Hercule Poirot or the letter? "You don't think it's possible that it could be Hercule Poirot?" I suggested as delicately as I was able. Poirot threw me a glance of reproof. "There are times when I have been in error, but this is not one of them. Clearly, then, since the letter seems impossible, it is impossible. There is some fact about the letter which escapes us. I seek to discover what that fact is." And thereupon he resumed his study of the letter in question, using a small pocket microscope. As he finished perusing each page, he passed it across to me. I certainly could find nothing amiss. It was written in a firm, fairly legible handwriting, and it was word for word as it had been telegraphed across. Poirot sighed deeply. "There is no forgery of any kind here. No, it is all written in the same hand. And yet, since, as I say, it is impossible—" He broke off. With an impatient gesture, he demanded the sheets from me. I passed them over, and once again he went slowly through them. Suddenly he uttered a cry. I had left the breakfast table and was standing looking out of the window. At this sound, however, I turned sharply. Poirot was literally quivering with excitement. His eyes were green like a cat's. His pointing finger trembled. "See you, Hastings! Look here, quickly, come and look. I ran to his side. Spread out before him was one of the middle sheets of the letter. I could see nothing unusual about it. See you not? All these other sheets have the clean edge. They are single sheets. But this one, see, one side of it is ragged. It has been torn. Now do you see what I mean? This was a double sheet, and so you comprehend one page of the letter is missing. I stared stupidly, no doubt. But how can it be? It makes sense. Yes, it makes sense. That is where the cleverness of the idea comes in. Read, and you will see. I think I cannot do better than to append a facsimile of the page in question. You see it now? Said Poirot. The letter breaks off where she is talking of Captain Marsh. She is sorry for him, and then she says, he enjoyed my show very much. Then on the new sheet she goes on. He said, but, mon ami, a page is missing. The he of the new page may not be the he of the old page. In fact, it is not the he of the old page. It is another man altogether who proposed that hoax. Observe, nowhere after that is the name mentioned. C'est épatant. Somehow or other our murderer gets hold of this letter. It gives him away. No doubt he thinks to suppress it altogether, and then, reading it over, he sees another way of dealing with it. Remove one page, and the letter is capable of being twisted into a damning accusation of another man, a man to who has the motive for Lord Edgware's death. It was a gift. The money for the confiture, as you say. He tears the sheet off and replaces the letter. I looked at Poirot in some admiration. I was not perfectly convinced of the truth of this theory. It seemed to me highly possible that Carlotta had used an old half-sheet that was already torn. But Poirot was so transfigured with joy that I simply had not the heart to suggest this prosaic possibility. After all, he might be right. I did, however, venture to point out one or two difficulties in the way of his theory. But how did this man, whoever he was, get a hold of the letter? Miss Adams took it straight from her handbag and gave it herself to the maid to post. The maid told us so. Therefore, we must assume either one of two things. Either the maid was lying, or else, during that evening, Carlotta Adams met the murderer. I nodded. It seems to me that that last possibility is the most likely one. We still do not know where Carlotta Adams was between the time she left her flat at 9 o'clock when she left her suitcase at Union Station. During that time, I believe myself that she met the murderer in some appointed spot. They probably had some food together. He gave her some last instructions. What happened exactly in regard to the letter we do not know. One can make a guess. She may have been carrying it in her hand, meaning to post it. She may have laid it down on the table in the restaurant. He sees the address and scents a possible danger. He may have picked it up adroitly, made an excuse for leaving the table, opened it, read it, torn out the sheet, and then either replaced it on the table or perhaps given it to her as she left, telling her that she had dropped it without noticing. The exact way of it is not important, but two things do seem clear. That Carlotta Adams met the murderer that evening, either before the murder of Lord Edgware or afterwards. There was time after she left the corner house for a brief interview. I have a fancy, though. There perhaps I am wrong. That it was the murderer who gave her the gold box. It was possibly a sentimental memento of their first meeting. If so, the murderer is D. I don't see the point of the gold box. Listen, Hastings. Carlotta Adams was not addicted to veronal. Lucy Adams says so, and I, too, believe it to be true. She was a clear-eyed, healthy girl with no predilection for such things. None of her friends nor her maid recognized the box. Why then was it found in her possession after she died? To create the impression that she did take veronal, and that she had taken it for a considerable time. That is to say, at least 6 months. Let us say that she met the murderer after the murder, if only for a few minutes. They had a drink together, Hastings, to celebrate the success of their plan. And in the girl's drink he put sufficient venom to ensure that there should be no waking for her on the following morning. Horrible, I said with a shudder. Yes, it was not pretty, said Poirot dryly. Are you going to tell Yap all this? I asked after a minute or two. Not at the moment. What have I got to tell? He would say, the excellent Yap, another nest of the mare. The girl wrote on an odd sheet of paper, c'est tout. I looked guiltily at the ground. What can I say to that? Nothing. It is a thing that might have happened. I only know it did not happen because it is necessary that it should not have happened. He paused. A dreamy expression stole across his face. Figure to yourself, Hastings, if only that man had had the order and the method, he would have cut that sheet, not torn it, and we should have noticed nothing, but nothing. So we deduce that he is a man of careless habits, I said, smiling. No, no, he might have been in a hurry. You observe it is very carelessly torn. Oh, assuredly, he was pressed for time. He paused and then said, One thing you do remark, I hope. This man, this D, he must have had a very good alibi for that evening. I can't see how he could have had any alibi at all if he spent his time first at Regent Gate doing a murder, and then with Carlotta Adams. Precisely, said Poirot. That is what I mean. He is badly in need of an alibi, so no doubt he prepared one. Another point. Does his name really begin with D? Or does D stand for some nickname by which he was known to her? He paused and then said softly, A man whose initial or whose nickname is D. We have got to find him, Hastings. Yes, we have got to find him. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24. News from Paris. On the following day we had an unexpected visit. Geraldine Marsh was announced. I felt sorry for her as Poirot greeted her and set a chair for her. Her large dark eyes seemed wider and darker than ever. There were black circles round them as though she had not slept. Her face looked extraordinarily haggard and weary for one so young, little more really than a child. I have come to see you, Monsieur Poirot, because I don't know how to go on any longer. I am so terribly worried and upset. Yes, mademoiselle. His manner was gravely sympathetic. Ronald told me what you said to him that day. I mean, that dreadful day when he was arrested. She shivered. He told me that you came up to him suddenly, just when he had said that he supposed no one would believe him, and that you said to him, I believe you. Is that true, Monsieur Poirot? It is true, mademoiselle. That is what I said. I know, but I meant not was it true that you said it, but were the words really true? I mean, did you believe his story? Terribly anxious she looked, leaning forward there, her hands clasped together. The words were true, mademoiselle, said Poirot quietly. I do not believe your cousin killed Lord Edgware. Oh. The color came into her face. Her eyes opened big and wide. Then you must think that someone else did it. Évidemment, mademoiselle. He smiled. I'm stupid. I say things badly. What I mean is, you think you know who that somebody is. She leaned forward eagerly. I have my little ideas, naturally. My suspicions, shall we say. Won't you tell me, please? Please? Poirot shook his head. It would be perhaps unfair. Then you have got a definite suspicion of somebody. Poirot merely shook his head, non-committally. If only I knew a little more, pleaded the girl. It would make it so much easier for me, and I might perhaps be able to help you. Yes, really, I might be able to help you. Her pleading was very disarming, but Poirot continued to shake his head. The Duchess of Merton is still convinced it was my stepmother, said the girl thoughtfully. She gave a slight questioning glance at Poirot. He showed no reaction. But I hardly see how that can be. What is your opinion of her, of your stepmother? Well, I hardly know her. I was at school in Paris when my father married her. When I came home, she was quite kind. I mean, she just didn't notice I was there. I thought her very empty-headed and mercenary. Poirot nodded. You spoke of the Duchess of Merton. You have seen much of her? Yes. She's been very kind to me. I've been with her a great deal during the last fortnight. It has been terrible, with all the talk, and the reporters, and Ronald in prison and everything. She shivered. I feel I have no real friends, but the Duchess has been wonderful, and he's been nice too. Her son, I mean. You like him? He's shy, I think. Stiff and rather difficult to get on with, but his mother talks a lot about him, so that I feel that I know him better than I really do. I see. Tell me, mademoiselle, you are fond of your cousin? Of Ronald? Of course. He and I haven't seen much of him the last 2 years. But before that, he used to live in the house. I always thought he was wonderful, always joking and thinking of mad things to do. Oh, in that gloomy house of ours, it made all the difference. Poirot nodded sympathetically, but he went on to make a remark that shocked me in its crudity. You do not want to see him hanged, then? No, no. The girl shivered violently. Not that. Oh, if only it were her. My stepmother, it must be her. The Duchess says it must. Ah, said Poirot. If only Captain Marsh had stayed in the taxi, eh? Yes, at least, what do you mean? Her brow wrinkled. I don't understand. If he had not followed that man into the house. Did you hear anyone come in, by the way? No, I didn't hear anything. What did you do when you came into the house? I ran straight upstairs to fetch the pearls, you know. Of course. It took you some time to fetch them. Yes, I couldn't find the key of my jewel case all at once. So often is that the case. The more in haste, the less the speed. It was some time before you came down, and then you found your cousin in the hall. Yes, coming from the library, she swallowed. I comprehend it gave you quite a turn. Yes, it did. She looked grateful for his sympathetic tone. It startled me, you see. Quite. Ronnie just said. Hello, Dina. Got them? From behind me, and it made me jump. Yes, said Poirot gently. As I said before, it is a pity he did not stay outside. Then the taxi driver would have been able to swear he never entered the house. She nodded. Her tears began to fall, splashing unheeded on her lap. She got up. Poirot took her hand. You want me to save him for you, is that it? Yes. Oh, please, yes. You don't know. She stood there, striving to control herself, clenching her hands. Life has not been very easy for you, mademoiselle, said Poirot gently. I appreciate that. No, it has not been easy. Hastings, will you get mademoiselle a taxi? I went down with the girl and saw her into the taxi. She had composed herself by now and thanked me very prettily. I found Poirot walking up and down the room, his brows knitted in thought. He looked unhappy. I was glad when the telephone bell rang to distract him. Who is that? Oh, it is Yap. Bonjour, mon ami. What's he got to say? I asked, drawing near the telephone. Finally, after various ejaculations, Poirot spoke. Yes? Who called for it? Do they know? Whatever the answer, it was not what he expected. His face dropped ludicrously. Are you sure? No, it's a little upsetting, that is all. Yes, I must rearrange my ideas. Oui? All the same, I was right about it. Yes, a detail as you say. No, I am still of the same opinion. I would pray of you to make still further inquiries of the restaurants in the neighbourhood of Regent Gate and Euston, Tottenham Court Road, perhaps Oxford Street. Yes, a woman and a man, and also in the neighbourhood of the Strand just before midnight. Come? But yes, I know that Captain Marsh was at the Dortheimer's, but there are other people in the world besides Captain Marsh. To say I have the head of the pig is not pretty. Tut him. Oblige me in this matter, I pray of you. He replaced the receiver. Well? I asked impatiently. Is it well? I wonder. Hastings, that gold box was bought in Paris. It was ordered by letter, and comes from a well-known Paris shop, which specializes in such things. The letter was supposedly from a Lady Ackerley. Constance Ackerley, the letter was signed. Naturally, there is no such person. The letter was received 2 days before the murder. It ordered the initials of, presumably, the writer in rubies, and the inscription inside. It was a rush order, to be called for the following day. That is, the day before the murder. And it was called for? Yes, it was called for, and paid for in notes. Who called for it? I asked excitedly. I felt we were getting near to the truth. A woman called for it, Hastings. A woman? I said, surprised. Mais oui. A woman, short, middle-aged, and wearing pince-nez. We looked at each other, completely baffled. End of chapter 24. Chapter 25. A luncheon party. It was, I think, on the day after that we went to the Widburns' luncheon party at Claridge's. Neither Poirot nor I were particularly anxious to go. It was, as a matter of fact, about the 6th invitation we had received. Mrs. Widburn was a persistent woman, and she liked celebrities. Undaunted by refusals, she finally offered such a choice of dates that capitulation was inevitable. Under those circumstances, the sooner we went and got it over with, the better. Poirot had been very uncommunicative ever since the news from Paris. To my remarks on the subject, he returned always the same answer. There is something here I do not comprehend. And once or twice he murmured to himself, Pince-nez. Pince-nez in Paris. Pince-nez in Carlotta Adams' back. I really felt glad of the luncheon party as a means of distraction. Young Donald Ross was there and came up and greeted me cheerily. There were more men than women, and he was put next to me at table. Jane Wilkinson sat almost opposite us, and next to her, between her and Mrs. Widburn, sat the young Duke of Merton. I fancied, of course it may have been only my fancy, that he looked slightly ill at ease. The company in which he found himself was, so I should imagine, little to his liking. He was a strictly conservative and somewhat reactionary young man, the kind of character that seemed to have stepped out of the Middle Ages by some regrettable mistake. His infatuation for the extremely modern Jane Wilkinson was one of those anachronistic jokes that nature so loves to play. Seeing Jane's beauty and appreciating the charm that her exquisitely husky voice lent to the most trite utterances, I could hardly wonder at his capitulation. But one can get used to perfect beauty and an intoxicating voice. It crossed my mind that perhaps even now a ray of common sense was dissipating the mists of intoxicated love. It was a chance remark, a rather humiliating gaffe on Jane's part, that gave me that impression. Somebody, I forget who, had uttered the phrase, "Judgment of Paris," and straightway Jane's delightful voice was uplifted. "Paris?" she said. "Why, Paris doesn't cut any ice nowadays. It's London and New York that count." As sometimes happens, the words fell in a momentary lull of conversation. It was an awkward moment. On my right I heard Donald Ross draw in his breath sharply. Mrs. Widburn began to talk violently about Russian opera. Everyone hastily said something to somebody else. Jane alone looked serenely up and down the table without the least consciousness of having said anything amiss. It was then I noticed the Duke. His lips were drawn tightly together. He had flushed, and it seemed to me as though he drew slightly away from Jane. He must have had a foretaste of the fact that for a man of his position to marry a Jane Wilkinson might lead to some awkward contretemps. As so often happens, I made the first remark that came into my head to my left-hand neighbor, a stout-titled lady who arranged children's matinees. I remember that the remark in question was, "Who is that extraordinary-looking woman in purple at the other end of the table?" It was, of course, the lady's sister. Having stammered apologies, I turned and chatted to Ross, who answered in monosyllables. It was then, rebuffed on both sides, that I noticed Brian Martin. He must have come late, for I had not seen him before. He was a little way further down the table on my side, and was leaning forward and chatting, with great animation, to a pretty blonde woman. It was some time since I had seen him at close quarters, and I was struck at once by the great improvement in his looks. The haggard lines had almost disappeared. He looked younger and in every way more fit. He was laughing and chaffing his vis-a-vis, and seemed in first-rate spirits. I did not have time to observe him further, for at that moment my stout neighbor forgave me, and graciously permitted me to listen to a long monologue on the beauties of a children's matinee which he was organizing for charity. Poirot had to leave early, as he had an appointment. He was investigating the strange disappearance of an ambassador's boots, and had a rendezvous fixed for 2:30. He charged me to make his adieus to Mrs. Widburn. While I was waiting to do so, not an easy matter, for she was at the moment closely surrounded by departing friends, all breathing out "darlings" at a great rate, somebody touched me on the shoulder. It was young Ross. "Isn't Monsieur Poirot here? I wanted to speak to him." I explained that Poirot had just departed. Ross seemed taken aback. Looking more closely at him, I saw that something seemed to have upset him. He looked white and strained, and he had a queer, uncertain look in his eyes. "Did you want to see him particularly?" I asked. He answered slowly, "I don't know." It was such a queer answer that I stared at him in surprise. He flushed. "It sounds odd, I know. The truth is that something rather queer has happened. Something that I can't make out. I'd like Monsieur Poirot's advice about it, because, you see, I don't know what to do. I don't want to bother him, but—" He looked so puzzled and unhappy that I hastened to reassure him. "Poirot has gone to keep an appointment," I said, "but I know he means to be back at 5 o'clock. Why not ring him up then, or come and see him?" "Thanks. Do you know, I think I will. 5 o'clock? Better ring up first," I said, "and make sure before coming round." "All right. I will. Thanks, Hastings. You see, I think it just might, be very important." I nodded and turned again to where Mrs. Widburn was dispensing honeyed words and limp handshakes. My duty done, I was turning away when a hand was slipped through my arm. "Don't cut me," said a merry voice. It was Jenny Driver, looking extremely chic, by the way. "Hello," I said. "Where have you sprung from?" "I was lunching at the next table to you." "I didn't see you. How's business?" "Booming, thank you." "The soup plates going well?" "Soup plates, as you so rudely call them, are going very well. When everybody has got thoroughly laden up with them, there's going to be dirty work done. Something like a blister with a feather attached is going to be worn bang in the middle of the forehead." "Unscrupulous," I said. "Not at all. Somebody must come to the rescue of the ostriches. They're all on the dole." She laughed and moved away. "Goodbye. I'm taking an afternoon off from business, going for a spin in the country." "And very nice, too," I said approvingly. "It's stifling in London today." I myself walked leisurely through the park. I reached home about 4 o'clock. Poirot had not yet come in. It was 20 minutes to 5 when he returned. He was twinkling and clearly in a good humor. "I see, Holmes," I remarked, "that you have tracked the ambassadorial boots." "It was a case of cocaine smuggling. Very ingenious. For the last hour I have been in a lady's beauty parlor. There was a girl there with auburn hair who would have captured your susceptible heart at once." Poirot always has the impression that I am particularly susceptible to auburn hair. I do not bother to argue about it. The telephone rang. "That's probably Donald Ross," I said as I went across to the instrument. "Donald Ross?" "Yes, the young man we met at Chiswick. He wants to see you about something." I took down the receiver. "Hello, Captain Hastings speaking." It was Ross. "Oh, is that you, Hastings? Has Monsieur Poirot come in?" "Yes, he's here now. Do you want to speak to him, or are you coming round?" "It's nothing much. I could tell him just as well over the telephone." "Right. Hold on." Poirot came forward and took the receiver. I was so close that I could hear, faintly, Ross's voice. "Is that Monsieur Poirot?" The voice sounded eager, excited. "Yes, it is I." "Look here, I don't want to bother you, but there's something that seems to me a bit odd. It's in connection with Lord Edgware's death." I saw Poirot's figure go taut. "Continue. Continue." "It may seem just nonsense to you." "No, no, tell me, all the same." "It was Paris set me off, you see." Very faintly I heard a bell trilling. "Half a second," said Ross. There was a sound of the receiver being laid down. We waited. Poirot at the mouthpiece. I was standing beside him. I say, we waited. 2 minutes passed. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. 5 minutes. Poirot shifted his feet uneasily. He glanced up at the clock. Then he moved the hook up and down and spoke to the exchange. He turned to me. "The receiver is still over the other end, but there is no reply. They cannot get an answer. Quick, Hastings, look up Ross' address in the telephone book. We must go there at once." End of chapter 25. Chapter 26. Paris? A few minutes later we were jumping into a taxi. Poirot's face was very grave. "I am afraid, Hastings," he said. "I am afraid." "You don't mean," I said and stopped. "We are up against somebody who has already struck twice. That person will not hesitate to strike again. He is twisting and turning like a rat, fighting for his life. Ross is a danger. Then Ross will be eliminated." Was what we had to tell so important? I asked doubtfully. He did not seem to think so. Then he was wrong. Evidently what he had to tell us was of supreme importance. But how could anyone know? He spoke to you, you say, there at Claridge's, with people all around. Madness, utter madness. Ah, why did you not bring him back with you? Guard him. Let no one near him till I had heard what he had to say. I never thought. I never dreamt, I stammered. Poirot made a quick gesture. Do not blame yourself. How could you know? I would have known. The murderer, you see, Hastings, is as cunning as a tiger and as relentless. Oh, shall we never arrive? We were there at last. Ross lived in a maisonette on the first floor of a house in a big square in Kensington. A card struck in a little spot by the doorbell gave us the information. The hall door was open. Inside was a big flight of stairs. So easy to come in. None to see, murmured Poirot as he sprang up the stairs. On the first floor was a kind of partition and a narrow door with a Yale lock. Ross's card was stuck in the center of the door. We paused there. Everywhere there was dead silence. I pushed the door. To my surprise, it yielded. We entered. There was a narrow hall and an open door one side, another in front of us opening into what was evidently the sitting room. Into this sitting room we went. It was the divided half of a big front drawing room. It was cheaply but comfortably furnished, and it was empty. On a small table was the telephone. The receiver stood down beside the instrument. Poirot took a swift step forward, looked round, then shook his head. "No, dear. Come, Hastings." We retraced our steps, and going out into the hall, we passed through the other door. The room was a tiny dining room. At one side of the table, fallen sideways from a chair and sprawled across the table, was Ross. Poirot bent over him. He straightened up. His face was white. "He's dead. Stabbed at the base of the skull." For long afterwards, the events of that afternoon remained like a nightmare in my mind. I could not rid myself of a dreadful feeling of responsibility. Much later that evening, when we were alone together, I stammered out to Poirot my bitter self-reproachings. He responded quickly. "No, no, do not blame yourself. How could you have suspected? The good God had not given you a suspicious nature to begin with. You would have suspected? That is different. All my life, you see, I have tracked down murderers. I know how, each time, the impulse to kill becomes stronger till at last, for a trivial cause." He broke off. He had been very quiet ever since our ghastly discovery. All through the arrival of the police, the questioning of the other people in the house, the 101 details of the dreadful routine following upon a murder, Poirot had remained aloof, strangely quiet, a far-away speculative look in his eyes. Now, as he broke off his sentence, that same far-away speculative look returned. "We have no time to waste in regrets, Hastings," he said quietly. "No time to say, if the poor young man who is dead had something to tell us. And we know now that that something must have been of great importance, otherwise he would not have been killed. Since he can no longer tell us, we have got to guess. We have got to guess, with only one little clue to guide us." "Paris," I said. "Yes, Paris." He got up and began to stroll up and down. "There have been several mentions of Paris in this business, but unluckily in different connections. There is the word Paris engraved in the gold box. Paris in November last. Miss Adams was there then. Perhaps Ross was there also. Was there someone else there whom Ross knew? Whom he saw with Miss Adams under somewhat peculiar circumstances?" "We could never know," I said. Yes, yes, we can know. We shall know. The power of the human brain, Hastings, is almost unlimited. What other mentions of Paris have we in connection with the case? There is the short woman with the pince nez who called for the box to the jeweller's there. Was she known to Ross? The Duke of Merton was in Paris when the crime was committed. Paris, Paris, Paris. Lord Edgware was going to Paris. Oh, possibly we have something there. Was he killed to prevent him going to Paris? He sat down again, his brows drawn together. I could almost feel the waves of his furious concentration of thought. "What happened at that luncheon?" he murmured. "Some casual word or phrase must have shown to Donald Ross the significance of the knowledge which was in his possession, but which up to then he had not known was significant. Was there some mention of France? Of Paris? Up your end of the table, I mean." The word Paris was mentioned, but not in that connection. I told him about Jane Wilkinson's gaffe. "That probably explains it," he said thoughtfully. "The word Paris would be sufficient, taken in conjunction with something else. But what was that something else? At what was Ross looking, or of what had he been speaking when that word was uttered?" He'd been talking about Scottish superstitions. "And his eyes were where?" "I'm not sure. I think he was looking forward to the head of the table where Mrs. Woodburn was sitting." "Who sat next to her?" "The Duke of Merton, then Jane Wilkinson, then some fellow I didn't know." "Monsieur le Duc. It is possible that he was looking at Monsieur le Duc when the word Paris was spoken. The Duke, remember, was in Paris, or was supposed to be in Paris at the time of the crime. Suppose Ross suddenly remembered something which went to show that Merton was not in Paris." "My dear Poirot, yes, you consider that an absurdity. So does everyone. Had Monsieur le Duc a motive for the crime?" "Yes, a very strong. But to suppose that he committed it, oh, absurd! He is so rich, of so assured a position, of such a well-known lofty character. No one will scrutinize his alibi too carefully, and yet to fake an alibi in a big hotel is not so difficult. To go across by the afternoon service, to return, it could be done. Tell me, Hastings, did Ross not say anything when the word Paris was mentioned? Did he show no emotion? I do seem to remember that he drew in his breath rather sharply. And his manner when he spoke to you afterwards, was it bewildered, confused? That absolutely describes it. Précisément. An idea has come to him. He thinks it preposterous, absurd, and yet he hesitates to voice it. First he will speak to me, but alas, when he has made up his mind, I am already departed. If he had only said a little more to me, I lamented. Yes, if only. Who was near you at the time? Well, everybody, more or less. They were saying goodbye to Mrs. Woodburn. I didn't notice particularly. Poirot got up again. Have I been all wrong? He murmured as he began once more to pace the floor. All the time. Have I been wrong? I looked at him with sympathy. Exactly what the ideas were that passed through his head I did not know. Close as an oyster, Yop had called him, and the Scotland Yard inspectors were truly descriptive. I only knew that now, at this moment, he was at war with himself. At any rate, I said, this murder cannot be put down to Ronald Marsh. It is a point in his favor, my friend said absent-mindedly, but that does not concern us for the moment. Abruptly, as before, he sat down. I cannot be entirely wrong. Hastings, do you remember that I once posed to myself 5 questions? I seemed to remember dimly something of the sort. They were, why did Lord Edgeworth change his mind on the subject of the divorce? What is the explanation of the letter he said to wrote to his wife, and which she said never got? Why was there that expression of rage on his face when he left his house that day? What were a pair of pince nez doing in Carlotta Adams' handbag? And why did someone telephone to Lady Edgeworth Chiswick and immediately ring off? Yes, these were the questions, I said. I remember now. Hastings, I have had in mind all along a certain little idea, an idea as to who the man was, the man behind. 3 of those questions I've answered, and the answers accord with my little idea, but 2 of the questions, Hastings, I cannot answer. You see what that means? Either I am wrong as to the person, and it cannot be that person, or else the answer to the 2 questions that I cannot answer is there all the time. Which is it, Hastings? Which is it? Rising, he went to his desk, unlocked it, and took out the letter Lucy Adams had sent him from America. He had asked Yop to let him keep it a day or 2, and Yop had agreed. Poirot laid it on the table in front of him and pored over it. The minutes went by. I yawned and picked up a book. I did not think that Poirot would get much result from his study. We had already gone over and over the letter. Granted that it was not Ronald Marsh who was referred to, there was nothing whatever to show who else it might be. I turned to the pages of my book. Possibly. I dozed off. Suddenly Poirot uttered a low cry. I sat up abruptly. He was looking at me with an indescribable expression, his eyes green and shining. Hastings! Hastings! Yes, what is it? Do you remember what I said to you, that if the murderer had been a man of order and method, he would have cut this page, not torn it? Yes. I was wrong. There is order and method throughout this crime. The page had to be torn, not cut. Look for yourself. I looked. Eh bien, you see? I shook my head. You mean he was in a hurry? Hurry or no hurry, it would be the same thing. Do you not see, my friend? The page had to be torn. I shook my head. In a low voice, Poirot said, I have been foolish. I have been blind. But now we shall get on. End of chapter 26. Chapter 27. Concerning Pince-Nez. A minute later his mood had changed. He sprang to his feet. I also sprang to mine, completely uncomprehending but willing. "We will take a taxi. It is only 9 o'clock. Not too late to make a visit." I hurried after him down the stairs. "Whom are we going to visit?" "We are going to Regent Gate." I judged it wisest to hold my peace. Poirot, I saw, was not in the mood for being questioned. That he was greatly excited, I could see. As we sat side by side in the taxi, his fingers drummed on his knee with a nervous impatience most unlike his usual calm. I went over in my mind every word of Carlotta Adams' letter to her sister. By this time I almost knew it by heart. I repeated again and again to myself Poirot's words about the torn page. But it was no good. As far as I was concerned, Poirot's words simply did not make sense. Why had a page got to be torn? No, I could not see it. A new butler opened the door to us at Regent Gate. Poirot asked for Miss Carroll, and as we followed the butler up the stairs, I wondered for the 50th time where the former Greek god could be. So far, the police had failed utterly to run him to earth. A sudden shiver passed over me as I reflected that perhaps he, too, was dead. The sight of Miss Carroll, brisk and neat and eminently sane, recalled me from these fantastic speculations. She was clearly very much surprised to see Poirot. "I am glad to find you still here, mademoiselle," said Poirot as he bowed over her hand. "I was afraid you might be no longer in the house." "Geraldine would not hear of my leaving," said Miss Carroll. "She begged me to stay on. And really, at a time like this, the poor child needs someone. If she needs nothing else, she needs a buffer, and I can assure you, when need be, I make a very efficient buffer, Monsieur Poirot." Her mouth took on a grim line. I felt that she would have a short way with reporters or news hunters. "Mademoiselle, you have always seemed to me the pattern of efficiency. The efficiency, I admire it very much. It is rare. Mademoiselle Marsh, now, she has not got a practical mind." "She is a dreamer," said Miss Carroll. "Completely impractical. Always has been. Luckily, she hasn't got her living to get." "Yes, indeed. But I don't suppose you came here to talk about people being practical or impractical. What can I do for you, Monsieur Poirot?" I do not think Poirot quite liked to be recalled to the point in this fashion. He was somewhat addicted to the oblique approach. With Miss Carroll, however, such a thing was not practicable. She blinked at him suspiciously through her strong glasses. "There are a few points on which I should like definite information. I know I can trust your memory, Miss Carroll." "I wouldn't be much use as a secretary if you couldn't," said Miss Carroll grimly. "Was Lord Edgware in Paris last November?" "Yes." "Can you tell me the date of his visit?" "I shall have to look it up." She rose, unlocked a drawer, took out a small bound book, turned the pages, and finally announced, "Lord Edgware went to Paris on November 3rd and returned on the 7th. He also went over on November 29th and returned on December 4th. Anything more?" "Yes." "For what purpose did he go?" "On the first occasion he went to see some statuettes which he thought of purchasing, and which were to be auctioned later. On the second occasion he had no definite purpose in view, so as far as I know." "Did Mademoiselle Marsh accompany her father on either occasion?" "She never accompanied her father on any occasion, Monsieur Poirot. Lord Edgware would never have dreamed of such a thing. At that time she was at a convent in Paris, but I do not think her father went to see her or took her out. At least it would surprise me very much if he had." "You yourself did not accompany him?" "No." She looked at him curiously and then said abruptly, "Why are you asking me these questions, Monsieur Poirot? What is the point of them?" Poirot did not reply to this question. Instead, he said, "Miss Marsh is very fond of her cousin, is she not?" "Really, Monsieur Poirot, I don't see what that has got to do with you." "She came to see me the other day. You knew that?" "No, I did not." She seemed startled. What did she say? She told me, though not in actual words, that she was very fond of her cousin. Well, then why ask me? Because I seek your opinion. This time Miss Carroll decided to answer. Much too fond of him, in my opinion. Always has been. You do not like the present Lord Edgware. I don't say that. I've no use for him, that's all. He's not serious. I don't deny he's got a pleasant way with him. He can talk you round, but I'd rather see Geraldine getting interested in someone with a little more backbone. Such as the Duke of Merton. I don't know the Duke. At any rate, he seems to take the duties of his position seriously. But he's running after that woman, that precious Jane Wilkinson. His mother. Oh, I dare say his mother would prefer him to marry Geraldine. But what can mothers do? Sons never want to marry the girls their mothers want them to marry. Do you think Miss Marsh's cousin cares for her? Doesn't matter whether he does or doesn't in the position he's in. You think, then, that he will be condemned? No, I don't. I don't think he did it. But he might be condemned all the same. Miss Carroll did not reply. I must not detain you. Poirot rose. By the way, did you know Carlotta Adams? I saw her act. Very clever. Yes, she was clever. He seemed lost in meditation. Ah, I put on my gloves. Reaching forward to get them from the table where he had laid them, his cuff caught the chain of Miss Carroll's pince-nez and jerked them off. Poirot retrieved them and the gloves which he had dropped, uttering confused apologies. I must apologize also once more for disturbing you, he ended, but I fancied there might be some clue in a dispute Lord Edgware had with someone last year. Hence my questions about Paris. A forlorn hope, I fear, but Mademoiselle seemed so very positive it was not her cousin who committed the crime. Remarkably positive she was. Well, good night, Mademoiselle, and 1,000 pardons for disturbing you. We had reached the door when Miss Carroll's voice recalled us. Monsieur Poirot, these aren't my glasses. I can't see through them. Come? Poirot stared at her in amazement. Then his face broke into smiles. Imbecile that I am! My own glasses fell out of my pocket as I stooped to get the gloves and pick up yours. I have mixed the two pairs. They look very alike, you see. An exchange was made, with smiles on both sides, and we took our departure. Poirot, I said when we were outside, you don't wear glasses. He beamed at me. Penetrating. How quickly you see the point. Those were the pince-nez found in Carlotta Adams' handbag? Correct. Why did you think they might be Miss Carroll's? Poirot shrugged his shoulders. She is the only person connected with the case who wears glasses. However, they are not hers, I said thoughtfully. So she affirms. You suspicious old devil. Not at all, not at all. Probably she spoke the truth. They think she did speak the truth. Otherwise, I doubt if she would have noticed the substitution. I did it very adroitly, my friend. We were strolling through the streets, more or less at random. I suggested a taxi, but Poirot shook his head. I have need to think, my friend. Walking aids me. I said no more. The night was a close one, and I was in no hurry to return home. Were your questions about Paris mere camouflage? I said curiously. Not entirely. We still haven't solved the mystery of the initial D, I said thoughtfully. It's odd that nobody to do with the case has an initial D, either surname or Christian name, except... Oh, yes, that's odd, except Donald Ross himself, and he's dead. Yes, said Poirot in a somber voice. He is dead. I remembered another evening when 3 of us had walked at night, remembered something else too, and drew my breath sharply. By Jove, Poirot, I said, do you remember? Remember what, my friend? What Ross said about 13 at table, and he was the first to get up. Poirot did not answer. I felt a little uncomfortable, as one always does when superstition is proved justified. "It is queer," I said in a low voice. "You must admit it's queer." "Eh?" I said it was queer. About Ross and 13. Poirot, what are you thinking about? To my utter amazement, and I must admit somewhat to my disgust, Poirot began suddenly to shake with laughter. He shook and he shook. Something was evidently causing him the most exquisite mirth. "What the devil are you laughing at?" I said sharply. "Oh, ho, ho," gasped Poirot. "It is nothing. It is that I think of a riddle I heard the other day. I will tell it to you. What is it that has 2 legs, feathers, and barks like a dog?" "A chicken, of course," I said wearily. "I knew that in the nursery." "You are too well informed, Hastings. You should say I do not know. And then me, I say, a chicken. And then you say, but a chicken does not bark like a dog. And I say, I put that in to make it more difficult. Supposing, Hastings, that there we have the explanation of the letter D." "What nonsense!" "Yes, to most people, but to a certain type of mind. Oh, if I had only someone I could ask." We were passing a big cinema. People were streaming out of it, discussing their own affairs, their servants, their friends of the opposite sex, and just occasionally the picture they had just seen. With a group of them, we crossed the Euston Road. "I loved it," a girl was sighing. "I think Brian Martin's just wonderful. I never miss any picture he's in. The way he rode that cliff and got there in time with the papers." Her escort was less enthusiastic. "Idiotic story. If they'd just had the sense to ask Ellis right away, which anyone with sense would have done." The rest was lost. Reaching the pavement, I turned back to see Poirot standing in the middle of the road with buses bearing down on him from either side. Instinctively, I put my hands over my eyes. There was a jarring of brakes and some rich bus driver language. In a dignified manner, Poirot walked to the curb. He looked like a man walking in his sleep. "Poirot," I said, "were you mad?" "No, mon ami. It was just that something came to me. There, at that moment." "A damn bad moment," I said, "and very nearly your last one." "No matter. Ah, mon ami, I have been blind, deaf, insensible. Now I see the answers to all those questions. Yes, all 5 of them. Yes, I see it all. So simple, so childishly simple." End of chapter 27.